Time for another webcast. I'm Ellen Dornan. I'm the National History Day Coordinator for the state of New Mexico. Today we are joined by Ashley Page, who's the Southern Regional National History Day Coordinator, and she is joining us for Ask a Documentary Expert. Ashley did National History Day for 5 years, from 8th grade to 12th grade, and made it to nationals for 4 out of those 5 years. Twice, she was a finalist at nationals, both times in the documentary category. So I can't think of a more appropriate expert to be asking about documentaries. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that if you've missed any of the webinars in this series, you can find them all recorded on our YouTube channel. The next one that's going to be coming up is December 6th, which is using primary sources. And we'll have Suzanne Shadle from UNM Zimmerman Library joining us. And she'll be talking with us about using primary sources, accessing primary sources, and using primary sources for History Day. Ashley is a graduate student at New Mexico State University. She's getting a master's in water sciences and management, and she was just telling me about some amazing research that she is doing right now on desalination. And so those research skills that you learn for History Day come in handy no matter what field you go into. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ashley.
Thanks, Ellen. So I'm going to go ahead and just set up my screen share for my PowerPoint. Can you see it?
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet. Is it up?
Ta-da!
Okay, perfect. So thank you for that introduction. As she said, I competed in the History Day documentary category for 5 years, and since that time I've also been a History Day mentor and an NHD regional and state competition judge, and I've also continued to make documentaries since my time in History Day. So I'm really excited to share some tips with you today. So today I'm going to cover some topics regarding the documentary creation process that are hopefully going to assist you and your students as they begin to prepare their documentaries for the upcoming regional competitions. Documentary is a really powerful medium to tell the story of your topic, but it's different than a lot of the other categories because most students don't have a lot of filmmaking experience before participating in NHD. It was my first introduction to filmmaking as a student, and because of this, it can be daunting to try to put together a documentary. There are a lot of different ways to go about the production process, but I'll share with you some of the things that I found most effective as a student. So just talking about the initial process, after you conduct your thorough research and before you begin any editing, sit down and write a script for your documentary. The 10-minute time limit is very strict for National History Day, so it's really important to work through exactly what you want to include before even attempting to start making the documentary. When you have to go through and cut and rearrange or rephrase things, it's really tedious and time-consuming to do that in the video editing program. So for the script that you write, you're going to want to aim for approximately 2.5 to 3 pages in length, single space. And depending on your formatting and the speed of the narrator, this should get you around 10 minutes of narration. You're going to want to be sure to aim for a little under 10 minutes though, just because you don't want to fill the entire documentary with continuous narration. And you're also going to need enough time to account for a title and end credits. And then if you've conducted any interviews and you selected some of those clips to include, you're going to want to account for that timing as well. And then beyond that, when you're editing the film, there are probably going to be several places that you find during that process where you choose to have the videos or images hang a little bit longer than the narration. And that's going to allow the viewer a chance to process what you've said, and it's also going to emphasize the strength of your imagery. So after you've created your scripts, you can begin the recordings. I would not recommend trying to sit down and record the entire script in one sitting. Instead, break it up by paragraph. It's really easy to make a mistake while you're reading the script. So this process is going to allow you to perfect each smaller section. And then when you're going through and doing the editing, it makes it a lot easier to align and move things around instead of having to cut up that narration. So next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the images and videos that you select. During the initial research process, I always found that it was really helpful to note and catalog any pictures or videos that you come across that you may want to use later in your documentary, because that's going to save you a lot of time when you're sitting down and doing the editing. Be sure that when you do this, you include a formatted citation for these visuals when you catalog them, so that you're not going to have to go back and try to remember where you found them and how to include them in the bibliography later on in the process. If you end up using them in your documentary, they're ready to be put directly into the annotated bibliography, so that's really helpful. And then sometimes I found that it was difficult, especially at first, to figure out where to turn for really good quality images and video, and especially for video. So I'll just share with you some tips about where to begin to locate some of that stuff. So the books that you come across in your research, those are oftentimes going to contain a few good images or even hints about where you can look for other images. So what I mean by that is, depending on your topic, there could be a museum or a collection or a library you can contact to try to get a hold of photographs and videos that they have about your topic. So a lot of where you look for videos is going to be dependent on your topic, but I'll just share a few ideas now that will cover a wide variety of times and topics just to get you started. So Time Magazine has a life collection that's available through Google Image. You can search directly by year or keyword that's associated with the picture, and their images are for the most part really high quality, and they cover important events that happened in US history and also normal life beginning back in the 1860s. The National Archives is another really great resource that you can look through. Their collections are really extensive and can be used to find documents, records, and other sources in addition to just images and videos. But I will say that their site does take some getting used to. In recent years, though, they've actually added a lot of their video footage to YouTube, which is helpful. But when you're going through and citing these sources, be sure to read through all the information that's provided, because a lot of them, while they're linked to the National Archives website through YouTube, they're actually from an outside collection or library. So just be sure that you're citing that appropriately. Another thing you're probably going to find is that when you're going through and trying to locate video for your film, you're going to see that a lot of the footage can be costly to use. So there's another site that I wanted to share with you that has a really wide range of video and audio files that are free. They've compiled open source material from all over the world, and everything on their site's available for you to use. It's a really well put together site. It's easy to search. It's really easy to narrow down by the category you want. So for example, you could select images and only still images will pop up. And then you can download it in any of the available formats, which is really helpful. And then another place that's often overlooked, especially for older topics, are VHSs. And your local libraries and collections generally have a really good bank of resources in terms of VHS tapes. So another thing about visuals, just one quick note, is regarding image quality. Be sure to use the highest possible imagery quality you can find. When you're editing your video, it'll appear that it's not blurry or pixelated on your computer, but it could be a lot different when it's projected on a TV or a large projector screen during competition. So now I just want to give you some tips about effectively using visuals and making your visuals interesting. So one of the most important things to remember is that you've seen every image in your documentary countless times, but it's your audience's and the judge's first time looking at it. So you want to be really aware of the speed that you're playing things at. You want to make sure that you're not flying through everything too quickly and that you give your audience a chance to process all of the great images that you found. When you have a lack of motion and video in your documentary, it tends to give it a PowerPoint-like feel. So that's why making good and extensive use of video footage can help to combat this. But not all topics have a lot of video footage available. This is a problem that I ran into with some of my projects in History Day. So this is when it becomes really important to just think creatively as filmmakers. You'll likely still have a lot of great still images that you think are important to show while you're telling the story of your topic. So you can add a slight bit of motion with a zoom or a pan, which is called the Ken Burns effect, that can not only help make your image more interesting for the viewer, but you get to decide what parts of the image you want to highlight, which can be really powerful in certain contexts. An image doesn't just have to be a photograph. It can be an illustration or a map, or it can even be part of a document like a newspaper headline. I just want to note though that when you choose something like a newspaper headline, you should try to do so sparingly and definitely limit the amount of text the reader has to look at, because they might miss out on a lot of your narration if they're trying to read through several sentences that are up on the screen. It's really easy for the audience to miss a lot. Another thing that you can do is create your own video footage. While this might not work in all cases, there are a lot of instances where it can enhance your documentary. So I'm going to show you a quick example. It's a 2-minute film that I created for a festival last fall, where I had to get a little bit creative with this. So I'm going to go ahead and try to screen share that video. Is it playing?
Rosie is 34. At 6 months, she was separated from her mother, forced to spend life as a test subject. Rosie was anesthetized over 100 times, given 15 liver biopsies with little pain relief. Infected with hepatitis C and diagnosed with seizures. The United States no longer funds chimpanzee research, thanks to advocacy efforts and scientific conclusions that they are unnecessary. Yet Rosie remains in a lab for continued profit and testing, rather than a sanctuary. After lifetimes of brutal testing, the fight continues to allow Rosie and remaining chimpanzees in laboratories peaceful retirement in a designated sanctuary.
Okay, so I'm going to pull my PowerPoint back up.
Wow, that was very powerful.
Thank you. Is my PowerPoint back up?
Yep, it sure is.
Okay, so in that documentary that I created, I found that a lot of the video footage was very repetitive. So I had to get creative, make my own film footage. So the footage of the cages with all the lighting that you saw was actually done at an animal shelter. So that's just sort of one example of footage that you can create on your own to help enhance your documentary. Just one quick note, if you use actors, people that are from outside of your group, then you should make sure that they sign an actor release agreement. I found a good example that just provides you with an idea of what should be included in one of these release forms. So if you just Google actor release form, there's a good example. It's a PDF from UT Austin. It can give you an idea. So then,
And Ashley, I'm just going to interrupt real quickly here.
Okay.
And if you want to send that to me, I'd be happy to post that up in the documentary resources section of our website. But also, I do want to remind people that anybody, unless you're doing an interview, the documentary needs to be made by you and or people in your group if you're doing a group documentary. So you need to think carefully. Interviews are one thing, but you need to think carefully about who you're going to be having filming and appearing on screen.
Definitely. And I'll send that link along to you so you can post it, Ellen.
Fantastic.
Okay, so then just in conclusion about visuals, they're really critical to your documentary. So just think deeply about what you want to include and then think about what exactly that image is conveying to the audience. Should be sure that you're really open to feedback from those that you show your film to for suggestions, like for example, other classmates or your teacher, because even though using a certain image or technique makes sense to you, it might not come across as clearly to the audience. So be sure that you address that feedback. So becoming a better filmmaker. The documentary creation process involves a lot of creativity. One thing that I would recommend is just sitting down and watching documentary films when you get a chance. Take notes about what techniques you find most effective. So for example, you see something in a documentary that you like. Can you imagine using that technique to help you tell your own story? And then if you sit down and take these notes beforehand, it can actually help you imagine how you want your script to be written and what images you might like to include or start looking for your script. Okay, so then just a little bit about the interview process. This was something that was completely new to me when I started National History Day documentaries, and I found it a little daunting at first. So after you conduct your research, you probably have a pretty good idea of at least one person that you might like to interview. They might be a scholar at UNM whose studies focus on your topic, or they could be someone who has a personal connection to the story. But before you contact people that you might like to interview, learn everything you can about their involvement with your topic just to make sure that they would be a really good source. And then go ahead and try to make contact with them through email, phone, etc. And just explain what you're doing and see if they might be interested in speaking with you. And so some of the people that I interviewed as a National History Day student, they lived outside of New Mexico. So for 2 interviews, I ended up recording a phone conversation with their permission so that I could go back and listen to it and potentially use the audio in the documentary. And then another interviewee, my sophomore year, worked at a university in Ohio, and he had students that were involved in filmmaking and excited about the project. So we sent along the interview questions, and his students were able to record his answers in their campus film studio. So just because someone is not in driving distance, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be willing to talk to you. But just be sure that you go through the rules and cite all of that appropriately. So when you're preparing for the interview process, just be sure that you sit down and you have really good fleshed out questions in advance so that you can get the most out of the interview. I think it's a really good idea to film your interviews when you're in the documentary category, just so that if you're doing them in person and the interviewee gives you permission, you have the option of including parts of that interview in your documentary, which can really enhance your story. So every student is going to have access to different types of cameras and different background experience. So it'd be a little hard for me to address particular cinematography techniques, although if anyone has questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. But in general, wherever your interview is conducted, try to use natural light to your advantage. When you rely on lamps or even overhead lighting, it can make it really difficult to see your interviewee on camera. So if it's possible, spend a few minutes examining the room that you're going to interview in, especially if you haven't been there before, and try to set up your camera and determine the best place for your interviewee to sit. So for example, if there's a really bright window, a lot of great natural light, you probably don't want your interviewee sitting directly in front of the window, because then it's going to make it really difficult to see their face. Instead, have them off at an angle where the natural lighting enhances their face. So you can see that lit up. And then in terms of sound, sound's really important. And you're just going to have to work with whatever you have access to. But if you or your school is looking for a recommendation, a shotgun microphone that you can attach to the camera is a really good option for interviews that are being conducted in close range, so just a few feet away. A lavalier microphone, those are the tiny microphones that are going to be attached to the interviewee. Those are going to produce the best quality sound for these purposes. If this is your first time working with this technology, just be sure that you do a few test runs in your classroom or at home beforehand so you can avoid running into technical issues. And then after you've conducted your interviews, when you're selecting clips to include in your documentary, just make sure that they're not too long. Only include the most important snippets and try to keep those to a minimum. And then one quick note about citing your interviews. Not every single interview is a primary source. So if you're interviewing someone that was actually present during the event or topic that your documentary covers, that's going to be a primary source. But if your interview is with a professor who studies your topic but was never present during any of the events that took place, then that's going to be a secondary source. So now getting into the editing process. For first-time filmmakers especially, I'd really recommend playing around with the program that you're going to use during the research phase before you even launch into editing the film. The interface of video editing programs takes a lot of getting used to. It's not intuitive at first, and it can be really frustrating to figure out. So if anybody needs any program recommendations, Apple's Final Cut Pro and Adobe's Premiere Pro are both top-of-the-line editing programs, but they're really costly. And when I was doing National History Day, I didn't need all the capabilities that those programs came with. So I used a program called Sony Vegas Movie Studio. I know that several other classrooms in the state use that for National History Day as well. It's a pretty powerful program. And then depending on the type you get, I think they have 3 different types of basic software. The prices range from $50 to $140, but they also have a free trial so that you can play around with it and just make sure that it has everything that you're looking for before you make that investment. And then I'll just add one thing about Adobe Premiere Pro. You can get access to the Adobe Suite Cloud as a student or an educator for, I think it's $20 a month. So this gives you access not just to Adobe Premiere Pro, but programs like Photoshop and other programs that'll allow you to edit and clean up your sound. So that's helpful. And you can also get a free trial of this and test it out. And it's compatible on Mac and Windows computers. And I can't speak as much to Final Cut because I haven't used that in a long time. Adobe Premiere Pro is the program I've used the last several years. If you're able to, I would really strongly recommend using an external hard drive to create your documentary. When you're creating a History Day documentary, it puts a lot of strain on the computer that you're using because there's so much data that's being stored and the computer is constantly having to access the files that you're editing. But when you use an external hard drive, all the memory demands are put on the drive instead of your computer. So that's really helpful. And the other thing that's useful with an external drive is that since everything's saved on it, you can edit your film on any computer as long as it has the editing software. which is really helpful in classrooms because I know that in some classrooms, everybody uses a different laptop every day. And it also makes it possible for students to work on the film at home if they have computers at home or with the editing software, or they can check out a computer from school. When you're using the external drive, you want to be sure that you organize all your files on the drive and in the program in a way that makes sense to you, because it can be really, really time consuming to go through and find things if it's not organized from the beginning. The main piece of advice that I can give you, and this sounds really simple, but it's easy to forget when you're getting wrapped up in the process, is to save constantly, because crashes happen and they always come at a time when you least expect it. So I would recommend just setting a timer to remind yourself to save every so often, because again, it's so easy to forget. And always save right after you make a really big change. It's not fun to spend a bunch of time getting something just right and then have a crash erase all of that work. So then I'm going to talk about the rendering and the burning process. So sometimes in the competition, your movie is going to be played in a DVD player and it's going to be shown on a TV. Sometimes it's shown on a projector, and it could even be shown on a computer. So you have to be ready as a competitor for any of these options. I always rendered and burned my documentaries for History Day in .avi format. Just found that that was the format that I had the least problems with. After I burned the copy, I tried it on any computer or TV that I could find just to be sure that it worked on a variety of devices. And then on the day of competition, take at least 3 copies with you. Find the room that you're going to be competing in and test your documentary out, and just make sure that it plays. There were a few times where I put in a DVD, it didn't play. I put in one of the backup DVDs and that one played for whatever reason. So that's why backup DVDs are really important. And when you test it in advance, it also gives you a chance to know what volume you want your film to be played at. So then when it's time for you to present, you can adjust the volume while you're putting your DVD in, so you can avoid the distraction of having to walk in front of the TV and adjust the volume. And then you also don't run the risk of your introduction not being heard or the volume being way too loud and making it difficult for people to focus on what you're saying. And finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about History Day from a judging perspective. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but just keep in mind that you've spent a ton of time researching and putting together your documentary, but competition day is going to be the first time the judges see your film. So one of the best things I found that you can do is show your documentary to people at different stages of production, especially people that haven't seen it before, and just listen to their suggestions. Ask them if there's anything in the film that's moving too quickly for them to process, or if there's anything that doesn't quite make sense. And then sit down, address this, show it to them again, and see if it's better the next time. When you talk really quickly in your narration and you don't have enough pauses, that's going to be one of the best ways to ensure that the judges are going to miss something. So if you're speaking really quickly in the narration just to try to fit everything in, go back and look at your script, and this should ideally happen before you even begin the editing process, and think about what you can consolidate. Because these natural pauses that flow with the film, they're just going to give the judges a chance to process everything, and it's just going to make your film flow better. The other thing that's really important is just to have a strong introduction, a strong thesis, and a strong conclusion. There shouldn't be any question in the judge's mind what your film is about, how it connects to the theme, what the conclusion is, what your thesis is. So another thing is just to be sure that you spend a lot of time focusing on your process paper and bibliography, and don't treat it as an afterthought, because this gives the judges more insight into your process and also your quality of research, which is really important. Because above all, documentary judges look for documentaries that are really well researched. This is the foundation of your project, and even the best looking documentary is going to fall short if it's not well researched. Beyond that, judges are just going to look for how well you tell the story. So did you use the 10 minutes effectively? In terms of visuals, is the film aesthetically pleasing? So did group members use quality images and videos, and did they do so in a way that was effective for the story? I would recommend looking through a sample judging sheet. I have an image of one here on the slide, but you can access it, I think, on the NHD website. And that's going to show you all the criteria that you're going to be judged on. And you can also use it as a resource to see what you can improve on for criteria day, or for competition day. When you're thinking about your judging interview, it's always a really good idea to practice before going into the interview. So come up with sample questions and run through them. If you're in a group, you really want to work together on this, just so that you can see how your dynamics work in an interview, because judges are going to want to look for the fact that everyone's talking an equal amount in the group. If you're in a History Day class, you can ask your other NHD classmates to watch your documentary and follow up with questions, just to pretend like it's a real interview and get more practice. There isn't really a specific or right way to prepare for the interview, so just do what's going to help you feel most comfortable and prepared for competition day. So that's all I have. I don't know if there are any questions. I can't hear you, Ellen. Ellen, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So I had a couple of questions that came in.
Okay.
And for people who want to ask a few more questions, you're welcome to email me at historyday@nmhum.org, or you can use the chat on the page. So Ashley, I have about 5 questions that came in while you were doing your presentation. So the first one was, what were your documentaries about for NHD?
So the first topic that I did in 8th grade was about the Texas Western Miners. So they were the first fully integrated basketball team that won a national championship. The second year, my topic was Native American boarding schools. The third year, did a project on Ernie Pyle, which I think was by far my favorite project to work on. The next year, I did it on the 911 emergency system, and then the year after that, chimpanzees that were used for scientific testing in Alamogordo.
And that's where your work came from.
So that, yes, that's where I got the idea for the topic, and then I had the opportunity to work on another film for a nonprofit, and I really liked working with Animal Protection of New Mexico my senior year on that documentary, so I decided to do a follow-up documentary on it for that.
This actually gives me questions. So when you're doing a topic like Indian boarding schools, were you able to get actual video footage, or did you rely on documentary photographs?
So there was a limited amount of footage, and I want to say that it was actually from a Thomas Edison collection. Some of the very first film footage was used for that, but it was primarily images.
And then I guess related to that, the second question I have that came in was, you recommended using the National Archives and archive.org because there's so much stuff up at the site. How do you find specific resources?
You cut out there a little at the end. What was that?
This is at archive.org in the National Archives. How are you finding video-specific resources?
Okay, so within, it's a little, like, so National Archives website can be a little complicated to use, so it's really going to depend on the topic that you're searching for, so that one's a little difficult to answer. On archive.org, that other website that I put up, it's not connected with the National Archives, it's another organization, and you can search specifically for videos within that site. So you type in your topic, what you're looking for, and then just select videos, or you can even, they have options to go through different libraries resources and different collections resources. So there are a few different ways to go through all of those sites.
Oh, thank you for that. And I think, I'm going to say just as a guess that it's probable that you can constrain the search at the National Archives too somehow. I don't know.
I know that they use Bing. It's powered by Bing.
Oh, okay. So here's one that came in while you were showing your Rosie video. How did you get permission to film at the shelter?
So when you're looking at filming at a different location, just talk to who is in charge of the site, who's running it, you know, who's the director of the location, who owns the location, and just try to get permission. It's going to depend on each site.
Who did you ask for permission?
So, I can't remember exactly. So for an animal shelter, you're just gonna, you know, want to ask the director of the shelter if it's okay, and then they'll have, they'll know exactly who to contact from there if they're not the right person for it. But I've always found that most places are pretty excited about History Day or filmmaking and are really willing to accommodate, especially for students.
Did you have to explain what History Day was to any of your interview subjects?
I'm sorry, you cut out at the beginning.
Did you have to explain what History Day was to any of your interview subjects?
Yes, I remember having to explain to almost all of them what History Day was, but once they found out about the competition, they were really excited to talk about the project and just help in any way that they could. So I always had a lot of luck with that.
Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So somebody asked, we're saying go ahead and watch documentaries and see what you like. Is there a documentary filmmaker that you like that inspires you?
So I guess I can give some examples of films that I think would be helpful for students to look at. There's a film that came out in 2014 called The Salt of the Earth, and I have been thinking about that film since I watched it. They use some really innovative techniques, and I think that would be a great one for students to look through. And then, you know, on top of that, if students want to look at Netflix, they have some good documentaries available. You can watch Blackfish on Netflix. Harlan County, USA is a historic documentary that students might be able to look at. So the technology is a little outdated in that one, but a lot of the techniques are still really good to use. And then also The Thin Blue Line is a really famous documentary. And I think that that one is still available on Netflix. So those are just a few examples that might be accessible to students.
And the Thin Blue Line is putting that out there, and I would put all of the documentaries are just really worth watching. And again, what Ashley was talking about with different techniques that documentary filmmakers use, Aaron Morris might do something like we saw in the little short Rosie video, where he'll film an object, or he'll film a little piece of road or something like that with the voiceover, so you're getting emotion, even if you're not, you didn't actually have footage of the events in the daily line. And so he uses a lot of very evocative imagery to suggest what happened in the events. It's very interesting.
So here's another
Sort of a technical question. When you were doing your interviews with out of state, are you having trouble hearing me?
A little bit. It's cutting in and out, but I'm catching most of it.
I'm trying not to get speakers. So when you were doing people out of state, how did you record the phone interview? And how did you record a video interview? Like if you were Skyping with somebody?
Okay, so for the phone interview, I don't remember the name of the exact device, but I actually purchased a device that plugged into the phone that allowed me to record. And again, that was several years ago, so I don't know if there is a better way to do that now, but I'd be happy to look into it and follow up with whoever asked that after the fact. And then for the video that I did out of state, it was sort of a remote directing is what it was. So the student that the professor worked with was able to set up the camera, and we were able to communicate about, what we wanted in the shot, that sort of thing. And then they were able to press play because we were in a different state. And so that was one thing that I did to get video footage from an interviewee out of state.
And I would also suggest that just because things are evolving, just because things are evolving, I know that, for example, we're using here today Google Hangouts, and that automatically records, and then you can take that video and download it off the if you want to do it that way. So, here's a question I would have for you, Ashley. Was your school able to provide you with any video equipment, or did you have to come up with all your own equipment yourself?
No, my school didn't have access to any of that.
So what kind of expense was it?
So I just, as a student doing History Day, I just used what we had access to. So I just used my family's old video camera for that.
Do you know of any? I know when I was today, one of the girls did most of the filming just with her cell phone, and one of the challenges with that was that some of the quality wasn't as high.
Right. So, this is just part of, when you're making a documentary, you just have to be really creative. So another option would be try to get a hold of someone that has film experience and may have a camera that you can borrow. Potentially reach out to a film store that does rentals. Reach out to a studio. Maybe reach out to a film professor in your area, and just get creative. See if there's somebody that's willing to help you access that.
Did you use a tripod?
Yes. So I think that it's really important for the interviews to use a tripod, because otherwise, you're holding your camera or your phone for upwards of 30 minutes trying to record an interview, and there's a lot of motion and a lot of bouncing, and it's really difficult in post-production to try to take that out. And so definitely try to get access to a tripod for interviews.
And I'll throw it out there that there are really teeny tiny little tripods that you can get that extend up to about 1.5 feet that are about $10. So a real professional tripod can be very expensive, but you can find these smaller options. Ashley, did you want to finish your second video? We have about 14 minutes left here. So.
Sure. So this is a video that was made by a group of students from Moriarty High School last year. I'm going to go ahead and try to pull that up. Can you see the video?
A group of basketball players in El Paso, black, white, Hispanic, just wanted to win some games. By becoming the first team to win an NCAA title with 5 black starters, the Miners weren't just champs on the court. They helped change the rules of the game off it.
Still trailing 72-65, and the ball game is over. As Kentucky has lost the championship game for the first time in their history.
The 1966 Texas Western Miners basketball team unintentionally explored desegregation on the court by playing an all-African American starting lineup during the national championship game. Encounters with racism, bias, and hatred from opponents, the American public, and the media inspired the team to exchange fear and hatred for a national title. This historic season broke down racial barriers and left a legacy of equality in college sports. The civil rights movement waged a contentious battle against racial inequality.
Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Segregation in America perpetuated the oppression and marginalization of people of color.
Satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
In the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision, Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren delivered a unanimous ruling.
We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal.
Race wasn't an issue at Texas Western College, nestled in the remote desert city of El Paso, Texas, where a melting pot of cultures on the U.S.-Mexico border had existed for years.
Don Haskins developed a vision for hard work and success on the basketball court, playing for Coach Hank Iba at Oklahoma State University. In 1962, Haskins left his job coaching high school girls for the head coaching position at Texas Western College. He hired Coach Iba's son, Mo, as his assistant, and together they assembled a team of outstanding players. They changed the course of history by actively exploring the recruitment of African American players on a fully integrated team. They personally visited practices and reassured parents they would provide the best of care for their sons.
Coach Haskins, he did not go by white, black, or he just went with the best players, and that was the main thing that we did.
Each of these 12 young men were the first in their families to attend college. Their shared experience created a close-knit, colorblind family with one goal: to win. Coach Haskins was known for his aggressive yet passionate demeanor. His approach required dedication and excellence. Practices were absolute hell, sometimes twice a day, and always lasting over 4 hours. Despite this, all the players had a close, unique relationship with Coach Haskins. African American athletes were primarily limited to historically black colleges, regardless of their academic and athletic abilities, but Haskins only saw talent.
My last name is Worthley, if you all know. That's not a typical black name. You know, Jones, him, those kind of type things. And we didn't have the idea of the TV cameras and everything else. So once they found out I was a person of color, I kind of lost on my scholarships. But El Paso stuck with me.
Coach Haskins received threatening hate mail from basketball fans, primarily in the South.
He shielded from me because I realized he got some hate mail, and most of it was from the South. And but he didn't react to it toward when I was around him. And as it went on, it bothered him, I think, at first, but then later on, I think he got over it because he knew that he did the right thing.
The team also had to cope with encounters with hatred and racism, despite Coach Haskins' attempts to shield them.
But I learned a long time ago, I can't beat or fight 20,000 people that pick and choose your battles.
The coaching staff had no idea what to expect for the season.
I was rated number 4 in the country. They came in to play, and I think we had them down about 30 at halftime. I'm not sure, but I think it showed us as coaches that we really had a chance to have a special team.
The coaches instilled the understanding that the next game was the biggest game of their life. As the season progressed, the team continued to win, both on the road and at home. The team ended with a 23-1 season, with only one loss to Seattle. They were undefeated on their home court. Coach Haskins was focused on winning. He chose to ignore the unwritten rules of the game, which dictated
You could only play 2 blacks at home, 3 on the road, and 4 when falling behind.
Texas Western's NCAA tournament win against Utah set the stage for what would become one of the most iconic basketball games in history. Texas Western was relatively unknown, while Coach Rupp was looking for his 5th championship win. Coach Haskins exchanged fear of racist backlash for a national title, despite Rupp's vow not to let 5 black players beat his team. The all-black minor and all-white Wildcat starting lineups faced off with one focus: playing basketball. David Lattin sent Rupp a message in the first seconds of the game. In the next few minutes, Bobby Joe Hill followed up with 2 back-to-back steals. These small plays changed the momentum of the game.
Bobby Joe just looked at him and said, well, how many times do you want me to take it? He took it from each of them, and it changed the game.
Texas Western stunned the Kentucky fans with a 72-65 national championship win. Coach Rupp did not shake hands with the Texas Western players after the game. The team had no assistance from cutting down the nets, and the media failed to give them the recognition they deserved for their national upset. El Paso rejoiced and gave the team a hero's welcome. People lined the streets to greet the new NCAA champions. Unfortunately, the media began to portray the players as thugs, Coach Haskins as an opportunist, and questioned if the players graduated. Hate mail and death threats came pouring in, and Don Haskins later said,
If I could change one thing in my coaching career, I'd wish we came in second in 1966.
The pain of that defeat still lingered in the minds of many people. What if Kentucky had beaten us by 10? We shake your head. What would the culture be like? Obviously, within another couple of years, the schools were going to integrate players. The schools themselves would integrate. But it happened so abruptly with us, and at a time when there were lots of players waiting for something to happen.
The true impact of the game was realized over time, as college basketball exchanged discriminatory policies and colleges opened to African American players. Within 10 years, the number of African Americans playing college basketball rose 47%, and the team's contribution to the civil rights movement began to be realized.
I wouldn't even become a professional basketball player if that didn't happen. So that definitely opened up the doors, and that was years later. So for sure, it opened up doors for a lot of people.
They received regional recognition in 1986 for the 20th anniversary in El Paso, Texas. President George W. Bush gave them a long overdue presidential recognition in 2006. The release of Glory Road highlighted the story, and in 2007, They were the first team to be inducted into the International Basketball Hall of Fame. In February of 2016, UTEP and CBS Sports hosted the 50th anniversary, and the team was honored during the 2016 NCAA tournament. The team was finally given the recognition on the court that they deserved.
The one thing they don't bring out the most, and the thing that bothers me probably more than anything else, is when we recruit these players, you never know how they're going to end up through their lives. But every one of the players that were on that team have been successful after they left school. And that's the most rewarding thing for me.
That was great, Ashley. Thank you. And just to repeat, that was the documentary that we just won state last year's nationals, a senior group documentary, and they were one of the finalists at nationals. It was quite sensational. Brings a tear to my eye every time. So I do want to. We just have a couple of minutes left. Yeah, you know what? Ashley, we'll put it back up here. So Ashley, can you talk really quickly about some of the things that you see in that documentary that might be notable? I know that it stood out for me, frequently how topic was in the theme, and they did use words to emphasize what the impact was of players. And so some of that time is helping the judges, I mean, in my mind, seeing it as a judge, is helping the judges sort of gauge that impact. What's something that stood out for you?
So the main thing that stands out for me is that this is a really well-researched documentary, and you can tell that the script was combed through extensively. It's a really well-told story. There aren't extra details that didn't need to be added in. Everything that is in the documentary helps it flow really well and ultimately just helps them tell a really effective story.
And knowing the students as you do you have any idea how many months of work they put in?
How many what?
How many months of work they put into their project?
It was an all-year project.
And do you know whether they actually traveled down to Utah to get those interviews?
Yes, they did.
They did.
Yes.
It's pretty amazing that they got all those subjects in there and all together again.
It's incredible.
So we just have a minute left, so I guess I'm going to have to say, any more questions? What we'll do is, if anybody has any more questions, please go ahead and email me or leave them up on the chat, and I'll let Ashley know, and maybe the two of us together can answer them. We're going to be putting this up on the documentary resources section of the website. And there's a section under resources for each project type, each category. And actually, I just wanted to thank you so much for being here today with us and sharing your knowledge. I had known all these things before I went into making these documentaries. Thank you for all the work you do as a regional coordinator.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.